brain damage. Um, it's just, it's very, some people think that's very abstract, but it's really not. I mean, you can touch a brain, you can feel a brain, but you can see these scans and you can see how each person is different in their response and how their brain responds to things. So for me, it's a very intense type of information. I mean, you got to take in a lot of information, but it's so powerful and it's something that we all need to really understand. Now, let's transition into Keith Hunter Jesperson, who is the happy face killer. There's actually a film that came out in 2014. It's called The Happy Face Killer. I've not watched it, but I will try to stream it at some point. I've got a long list of these movies and biopics I want to watch. But he was born on April 6th of 1955, and he's Canadian American. And we know that he murdered at least 8 women in the United States during the early 1990s. He was known as the Happy Face Killer because he drew smiley faces on his many letters to the media and authorities. Many of his victims were sex workers and transients who had no connection to him. Strangulation was his preferred method of murdering, and often the same method that he used to kill animals as a child. Can you remember what the other 2 things are in the McDonald triad that we look for as indicators? One is kill animals. The other is wetting the bed. And I'm going to give you a minute to think of the third one. Fire setting, okay? It's fire setting. So if you guessed fire setting, you were correct. It's cruelty to animals, obsession with fire setting, and persistent bedwetting past the age of 5. And this leads to the violent behaviors, particularly homicidal behavior and sexually predatory behavior. So there are other studies who say that they've not found statistically significant links between the triad and violent offenders. And I respect research. I completely respect research. It's what I do. It's what I read pretty much on a daily basis. But I find it hard. I find it hard to believe that you have some studies who do not find that to be a red flag or some sort of I don't know how to say, I don't know what word I'm looking for. I just don't know how you could find that there's not some sort of significant link to those 3 behaviors specifically to serial killers. They are far too common when you're looking at the common denominators between serial killers, common characteristics. So he killed his first victim. Her name was Tanya Bennett. When it was after her body was found, media attention surrounded Laverne Pavlinac, who was a woman who falsely confessed to having killed Bennett with the help of her abusive boyfriend, John Sosnowski. Jesperson became upset because he was not getting media attention. Who does that sound like? Who does that sound like? I'll give you a minute to think about it. BTK. That's how BTK got caught. His ego. He wanted the attention. He wanted people to know that he did it. And really played a bit of a cat and mouse game with police. So Jesperson, following along that same trail, he thought that he would draw a smiley face on a bathroom wall hundreds of miles from the scene of the crime. And then he wrote an anonymous letter confessing to Bennett's murder, providing proof of it. Well, that did not really elicit a response from anyone. And I'm not really surprised. I mean, who really pays attention to what's written on bathroom walls? I mean, I don't. And you don't see it that often anymore. But back then, of course, there was a lot. I just recall you go into any public restroom, there was a lot of graffiti and things that people would write on the wall. Well, who's going to pay attention to that? And who's going to think that that's serious? I mean, who writes a confession to a murder on a bathroom wall? Well, we know that Jesperson did. Wasn't successful. So when that did not elicit a response, he began writing letters to the media and authorities, and he signed the bottom. He always had a smiley face on there. It was his last victim that ultimately led to his capture, and that's really kind of a ridiculous statement. A lot of times it is their last victim. It's the one that has the freshest DNA. It's the one that has the most recent paper trail, if there is one. It really can be. It's more often the very last one that gets a person caught. Excuse me. While he's claimed to have killed as many as 160 people, only 8 murders have been confirmed, and that's incredibly common, right? You may have a serial killer who confesses to 250 murders, but unless there's proof, there's no way the court system can actually, say that that person was responsible. In this case, we only had enough. We only had enough evidence to convict him of 8 of the crimes, and 1 is enough, right? If they get life in prison or the death penalty, 1 is enough. And I'll always say I understand why some people want these cases to go to court, but what is the purpose of wasting that money on another trial when the person's already in jail for life or even on death row? Now, it doesn't matter what you do anymore in this world. You are typically in prison for years and years and years and years while this court system works through its processes. So they're not going to get out anytime soon. Even if they get a new trial granted to them, they're not going to get out of jail. You don't get that when you've been convicted of these type of things. It's really kind of, for me, it's kind of crazy. But I'm not one of those families who have someone who was killed and did not get justice or didn't feel they got justice. So I get it, I do get that. But it does waste a lot of money and a lot of time that we could be using to convict other people, right? All right, so Jesperson's early life was, in my opinion, quite horrific. Again, he was born on April 6th of 1955 to Leslie and Gladys Jesperson, they called Leslie Les, in Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canada. He was the middle child with 2 brothers and 2 sisters. So a large family, right? 7 in the family, 5 siblings total. That's it. Maybe not back then, it wasn't a huge family, but for today, that's a large family. Jesperson's father was a domineering alcoholic. According to Jesperson, his paternal grandfather was prone to violence. Now, Jesperson's father denied being an abusive parent, which most do. However, while investigating for his book on the killer, author Jack Olson was able to confirm much of the claimed abuse with other family members. So I'm going to tell you that I believe he was abused. I think that his grandfather was abusive. I think his father was abusive. And I think that it was both physical and mental based on the outcomes of this person. He claimed to have been treated like an outcast and a black sheep by his own family, and he was teased by other children for his large size at a young age. He, at full maturity, he was 6'6", a big man. A very big man. And at growing up, he was also considerably larger than other kids in his class. And sometimes that in and of itself is difficult for a person if they're not accepted for that. Um, I was always one of the shortest people in my class, and sometimes that's difficult, you know. It's still difficult at times because it's frustrating that we can't reach things. We have to have help. Like the other day, I had to get Kevin to get clothes out of a washing machine. We were staying in an Airbnb for Joshua's wedding, and I could not reach the bottom of the washing machine, and it made me so mad. And I couldn't find a step stool because like almost every room in my house has a step stool for me. But that's an accommodation, right? What accommodation are you going to give the largest person in the class? You know, they feel like an outcast. They don't feel like they're a part of a group. They just don't fit in anywhere. And kids are bad for that. You know, that's one of the things that we have to make sure we teach our children is to be inclusive and appreciate everyone's differences. I mean, we talk that talk all the time in early childhood. So it's important, and it's important for parents and guardians to have those conversations as well. If children see you treating other people a certain way, they're going to think that it's okay to do that. Well, my dad does it, that it's fine. My mom does that, it's perfectly fine. It's part of our normal conversation, it's perfectly fine. That's not fine. It is not fine to do that. You know, there are many, many adults in this world who are still bullies, and they bully people in the workplace, and they bully people in whatever social circle that they're in. It's not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay in early childhood, and it's not okay in adulthood either. So I think that we have to be strong enough to stand up for people and be kind of their champion if we're going to make the world a better place, right? Um, it's reported that he was a lonely child who showed a propensity for torturing and killing animals. After the family moved to Selah, Washington, he had trouble fitting in and making friends because of his large size, but his brothers did not help him. Instead, they nicknamed him Igor or Ig, and that's a name that stuck throughout his school years. Now, we may think, I mean, people have nicknames. Some people had nicknames growing up. I had quite a few nicknames. My brother called me Half Pint. He still does. My dad called me. What was it he called me? We back in the day we had gosh, what are they called? You know, CB radios. Everybody had a CB radio, and my name on that was Lamb Chop. I don't even know how I got these. I don't even know how I got that, but it was. I mean, I still have like the name tag and stuff. We were such dorks, but it was a thing to do at the time. So we all have those kind of nicknames. Those weren't bad nicknames. Those weren't nicknames that hurt my feelings or anything like that. That's just part of who I was. But now calling someone Igor or Ig, that kind of has a very negative connotation. And I think that we would be very wise as adults to make sure that if students do have nicknames for other students, if they're okay with it, you know, if the student with the nickname is okay with it, if they think it's cool, maybe they have a lot of self-esteem and it doesn't really bother them, I still think it's something we have to monitor. I think it's something, and those of you who are listening, maybe you've had similar experiences. Maybe you had nicknames, or maybe you were called names growing up. It's hurtful. It's really, it can really change someone in a very bad way, and we know that just from these studies. Because Jesperson was really bullied by his brothers and had a hard time fitting in and making friends, he was very shy and he was very content to play by himself much of the time. He would often get into trouble for behaving badly, sometimes violently, and would be severely punished by his father, which included beatings, sometimes with a belt in front of others, and in one case he received an electric shock. I do not have to tell you how horrific that is for a child to be beaten with a belt in front of others. That's humiliation. humiliation is identified as one of the triggers for children to act out, or in this case, completely kind of